Super Smash Bros. Is a Nintendo franchise that holds a special place in mine and many gamers' hearts. For many, such as myself, it was an introduction to Nintendo and many of Nintendo's franchises and characters, and later on, such as in Ultimate, it was a gateway for seeing many third-party franchises as well. However, another set of people were introduced to the world of competitive gaming, also known as esports, by means of Super Smash Bros. Just about every Super Smash Bros. Title has enjoyed a lengthy and healthy competitive scene, some games a bit shorter than others. The one game in the series that had a lot of momentum behind it then died off without much fanfare is the most polarizing game in the franchise, 2008's Super Smash Bros. Brawl for the Nintendo Wii. Super Smash Bros. Brawl. It's a game that, when you bring it up these days, it's going to cause some very strong opinions. You have some people who really love it, saying that it brought a lot of things to the franchise, such as all new characters, all the third-party characters, all the new modes, such as online play, which wasn't really that good back in the day, but hey, it was cool to have online play back in 2008 when Melee didn't have that. And of course, you had the Subspace Emissary, which wasn't, the best thing in the world, but hey, it was still pretty cool. The cutscenes are fun to watch these days. But on the flip side, you have a lot of people who say the game's absolute trailer trash, like the bag of trash that's in my hallway right now and I need to throw away. Saying that the game was nowhere near as good as Melee or any other game ever, and it should have just died the first month it came out in some situations. As someone who was around for Brawl and its competitive lifespan from when the game first released to around 2010 or so, I got out of the game around then, but I kept up with the scene until it died around 2012 or so. I thought it'd be fun to go back in time and look at Super Smash Bros. Brawl and see why it died. And for me, I attribute it to 4 reasons why Brawl didn't really have the longest competitive lifespan. But before we get into the video, I would like you to please follow me on Twitch, please follow me on Twitter, please follow me on Instagram, and please hit me up on Patreon if you feel so kind. With that out of the way, let us get into the 4 reasons why Super Smash Bros. Brawl died. We can't have any discussion about competitive Brawl without bringing up Meta Knights. Brawl was a game of jank. A lot of jank. But atop the jank pile was Meta Knight. Meta Knight was the best character in Brawl, bar none. He had no losing matchups, had an amazing recovery, aerials that were fast and sent at mean angles that meant death for most characters. He had the best set of special moves in the whole game. Hell, I think Mach Tornado alone just shut down most of the roster. And he abused Brawl systems to the point where, if played perfectly, he was essentially untouchable. It got to the point where rules were just in place only for Meta Knight just to make sure that you could actually hit him without him getting a single hit than him just scrooging or planking the whole time. And also, who made these names? Smash players, you guys made terrible nicknames for moves. It was clear from day one Meta Knight was the best character in the game. And as people were perfecting Brawl play, Meta Knight was only going to dominate more and more, with only a handful of other characters even being in the conversation. It got to the point where, I think in 1 year, Meta Knight won over 50% of the tournaments in the entire world. Suffice to say, that's a lot of tournaments. In fact, I remember throughout most of 2008 and 2009, most top 8s at most majors or regionals were nothing but Meta Knights, or mostly Meta Knights. That brought up discussion on whether or not the character should be banned from tournament play. It was clear the character blew out most characters, and he had to have rules just in place to make it even possible to hit Meta Knights. And given the numbers, it was clear that more people were just going to pick up Meta Knight, if not as a main, at least as a secondary to cover their main character's bad matchups. And chances are their main character lost to Meta Knights. Obviously, banning a character is a pretty big deal, and Smashboards was a huge mess when talking about the character. And it's not like both the pro ban and the anti-ban sides didn't have points. On the pro ban side, people were worried about the character being over-centralized and Meta Knight being the only viable option in the game, with maybe 4 or 5 other characters being viable at all in a game with 35 characters. Plus, newcomers in the scene might be turned off if they hit a tournament just to get lamed out by Meta Knight their first or second round, and yeah, that's a really great tournament experience. On the anti-ban side, people were worried about their work with a character being thrown down the drain. I mean, I can kind of see that reasoning. You put all your time and effort into a character just so that character did not be allowed in tournaments, like, what was the point of me putting all that time into Brawl in the first place? Plus, at that time, most top players mained or at least secondary to Meta Knight, and why would they go to tournaments just to not be able to play their best? With top player attendance being a draw to majors, most majors at the time opted to keep Meta Knight available. There were some regions that did ban Meta Knight, like my home in New Mexico had Meta Knight banned for most of 2009, and I think there were a few other regions that followed suit, but without unifying rule sets, it was hard to get everyone on the same page. The Unity Rule Set Committee did ban Meta Knight in 2011, but by that point everyone had moved on, and that leads me to my next point, lack of leadership. The closest thing Brawl had to a governing body was the Unity Rule Set Committee, which was an honest attempt to unify the Brawl scene, but due to timing and lack of control, the Unity didn't pan out. Brawl's active years were from 2008 to 2012, more or less, so this was before tours like Capcom Pro Tour or the Tekken World Tour were things. Everyone was left to their own devices to plan tournaments, rules, find partnerships, all that stuff. One place would have one stage banned, but the other it would be legal. And as a side note, can we go back to the days where we could play on fun stages like Delfino Plaza in tournaments? One place would have Meta Knight banned, but the other he would be legal. Hell, even doing something as minor as removing random tripping from the game through hacks was controversial. In fact, I remember one Smashboards post saying that taking out random tripping was like playing a different game. Major League Gaming, also known as MLG, did come into the Brawl scene in 2010, hosting tournaments, but that was met with contempt from Nintendo as Nintendo didn't support MLG, nor allowed Brawl to be streamed at the tournament. Keep in mind, this was before Twitch really took off or even was a thing at that time. Brawl was always on eggshells at MLG, but the reason why MLG dropped Brawl entirely was due to match fixing at one of the events. Without MLG pumping money and attention to the scene, it went back to the same state as it was before then. Unity was an attempt to give the Brawl scene some, well, unity. However, the Unity Committee didn't have the presence like a Capcom or a Namco, nor did it have the support of everyone in the scene, so organizers didn't have much reason to follow them. If Unity did something contentious like, say, ban Meta Knight or red card top players for throwing matches, if the organizers disagreed with them, they had little incentive to follow their rules. I guess this point ties in with my last point. The Brawl scene was very fractured. People couldn't decide on rules and what was the way to play competitive Brawl. Should Meta Knight be banned? What about things like, say, chin grab limits or ledge grab limits? Hell, even starter stages weren't set in stone until much later on. And this isn't going into Brawl modding, which became a major thing in 2009 or so. Some of the more notable mods were Balanced Brawl, which kind of sounds like it says it is, Brawl Plus, a remixed version of Brawl, Brawl Minus, a joke version of Brawl, and Project Melee, which is an attempt to make Brawl play like, well, Super Smash Bros. Melee. Some communities love these mods, and hell, in New Mexico we had exactly one guy who loved Brawl Plus. Only one guy, no one else cared. But ultimately, many of them just fell to the wayside. Of these mods, only Project M became its own thing, and I kind of want to do a video about Brawl mods. Would there be any interest in one? Without a doubt, and probably the thing that most people will take away from the competitive scene at this time was the divide between the Super Smash Bros. Melee community and the Super Smash Bros. Brawl scene. Brawl players were young, and for a lot of them, Brawl was their first competitive game. Melee players liked their game, and while some of them did give Brawl a fair shake of the stick, some of them, like Mewtwo King, did play Brawl at a high level, most of them just gave up and went back to Melee early on. There was a lot of tension between the two communities, and not just online. A lot of offline tournaments were met with some drama, like I remember during Genesis 2009, Brawl's Grand Finals were booed. There were several tournaments where the rules explicitly stated, no Brawl. And personally, I know a few Brawl players who got called some very not so nice things by Melee players. If you want to see some real hate, go look at Smashboards posts from around 2008-2009, and you will wonder how we all just didn't burn bridges with each other back then. The reason why Melee players have a reputation of being elitist jerks is because of their attitudes during the Brawl era, and that stank hung around for years to come, well into Super Smash Bros. 4 and, to a small extent, in the Ultimate lifespan. Or maybe the stunk just hang around because they don't know how to shower. Ultimately though, I think the main reason why Brawl faded away after 2012 in the competitive scene is that people just, well, moved on. Most Brawl players I knew at the time were done with the game, they were done with the jank, and moved on to other games like, say, League of Legends, or maybe they went to Street Fighter like I did, or just got out of the scene in general. Many of the biggest names in Brawl at the time were in high school or just out of high school, and when you're that young, you want to branch out and try other things. Keep in mind, I'm 26 now, and most top or known players at the time weren't much older than me. With Project M taking off and Melee getting a second wind at EVO 2013, Brawl's time in the sun was, well, over. With the announcement of Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS at E3 2013, most Brawl diehards opted to move on to that game. And that was about it for Super Smash Bros. Brawl. It appears at tournaments every now and again, but for most people they're just kind of over it. However, that's not to say Brawl's legacy is forgotten. Brawl is a study of how a game can sell over 13 million units but not reflect in the competitive scene, and it shows how games are designed for competitive play versus casual play. Brawl served as a perfect gateway for many talents to get introduced to competitive gaming. Players like ESAM, Tyrant, J-Tails, Anti, Ally, and legends like Zero and MKLeo got their start in Brawl. Plus, all the countless players that make up local scenes today more than likely got started here in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. And say what you will about Brawl as a game, but any game that can act as a gateway for competitive gaming is worthy of praise. So there you have it. Those are the 4 reasons why I think Super Smash Bros. Brawl didn't have the longest competitive lifespan. Yeah, you could debate these one way or another, but this is my opinion and this is how I interpreted the situation. Looking back at it, I know Brawl wasn't the most popular game and it wasn't the best of games competitively, but you know what, for me, in my life, it was one of the best things that happened to me, and I would never trade those memories or those experiences for anything in the world. Maybe a copy of Panzer Dragoon Saga on the Saturn, and maybe a nicer apartment in downtown Tokyo, but that's a whole different topic. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope I learned you some history from the Super Smash Bros. Brawl days, and let me know what you think about the video. I think these videos are going to come out bi-weekly from now on. I think from now on I'm going to mostly focus on fighting games and some fighting game history and some fighting game trivia. And yeah, let me know what you think about that in the comments. Anyway guys, remember to hit me up on social media, and I'll see you on the next episode of The ZMan Show. Take care everybody. Man, Pit was so cool in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Nintendo, make a new Kid Icarus game please.